In the moment before the murders, someone inside that Idaho house heard a sound. Not a scream, not a crash, just breathing. Slow, steady, deliberate breathing coming from a dark hallway where no one should have been. And by the time the sun rose, for students were dead, a community was shattered, and investigators were staring at a crime so calculated it looked like it was committed by someone studying their reactions in real time. The house at 1122 King Road was supposed to be a sanctuary, a chaotic but warm refuge filled with laughter, shared secrets, and the everyday rhythms of college life. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadle, and Ethan Chapin were young, bright, and surrounded by friends, unaware that someone had been watching them. For weeks, maybe months, a predator walked in their shadow. Someone fascinated, obsessed, and studying them with a detachment that only grew darker the closer he got. Bryan Kohberger wasn't the kind of man anyone expected to see in a national headline. A 28-year-old criminology PhD student, intelligent, analytical, and intensely introverted. He carried himself like a man who spent more time observing than living. He had reportedly struggled socially, academically, even physically, battling addiction, isolation, and a desire to belong that never seemed reciprocated. But behind those layers, investigators would later uncover an even more disturbing truth. Kohberger wasn't just studying criminology. He was fascinated by the psychology of murder, by controlled dominance, and the idea of executing the perfect crime. On the night of November 12, 2022, the four students returned to their home unaware that a white Hyundai Elantra had been circling their neighborhood repeatedly, making slow, deliberate passes with headlights off. Cameras across the small town of Moscow caught it looping past the house again and again, like a predator rehearsing the kill. Kohberger's phone pinged near the King Road house 12 times in the months leading up to the murders, investigators later discovered. He didn't know them personally, but he watched them. Inside the house, the roommates settled into their usual routines: food, music, TikTok videos, late-night conversations. They locked the doors, unaware that their killer didn't need an invitation. The quiet of the early morning hours wrapped around the house like a veil. Moscow was the kind of town people believed was safe. No major murders in years. Nothing that suggested a threat could be lurking just outside. Around 4 a.m., everything changed. One of the surviving roommates later told police she heard what she thought was crying. Then a voice, a man's voice, soft but chilling. "It's okay. I'm here to help you." She stepped out of her room just long enough to glimpse a tall figure dressed in black, wearing a mask, moving through the hallway with a calmness that felt unreal. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He just walked past her and left the house as silently as he had entered. That was the moment that would haunt her forever. A killer didn't need to kill her. He only needed her to freeze. When police entered the house hours later, they encountered a scene so violent it unnerved even seasoned investigators. No one could understand how a single person could move through a house with such confidence and brutality without waking the entire neighborhood. No forced entry. No weapon found. Only a single piece of evidence, left almost surgically, a knife sheath with a DNA profile on the snap. The mystery sent the nation into hysteria. Everyone had a theory: friends, exes, neighbors, strangers online. But investigators, exhausted and increasingly desperate, followed the few real leads they had: the white Hyundai, the phone pings, the DNA, and a digital trail that suggested extensive planning. When they finally identified the Hyundai Elantra belonging to Bryan Kohberger, the entire case shifted. They discovered that Kohberger had turned off his phone around the time of the murders, a detail that looked less like coincidence and more like intention. When they stopped him in Pennsylvania weeks later, he asked a chilling question. Was anyone else arrested? It was a question of someone who didn't expect to be caught alone. As detectives built their case, a disturbing psychological portrait began to form. Kohberger had studied criminal behavior with an almost academic detachment. He reportedly asked past classmates how they would commit murder. He researched, analyzed, and debated real cases with fascination, never revealing what investigators suspected he was planning. Some who knew him described him as awkward, controlling, obsessed with power dynamics. Others saw his sharp intellect, but sensed something was off, something cold behind the eyes. The trial preparations exposed even more unsettling details. Kohberger's routine that night, investigators said, was meticulous. He parked down the road, approached the house on foot, and slipped inside quietly. He moved through the rooms like someone who had studied the layout, possibly even been inside before. He left behind one critical mistake: the DNA on the knife sheath. A single trace that contradicted the idea of a perfect crime. The families of the victims were devastated, shattered in ways that language cannot express. Parents who believed their children were safe in a college town now face a nightmare that felt unreal. The public demanded answers. What was the motive? Why these victims? Why this house? But prosecutors said there was no evidence Kohberger knew them personally. This was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of obsession, a crime of opportunity, a crime of someone who believed he could outsmart everyone. In 2025, after years of delays, hearings, and emotional tension, Kohberger entered the courtroom and did what almost no one expected. He pleaded guilty. No dramatic trial. No shocking defense. No grand reveal of motive. Just a quiet admission that left the world with more questions than answers. The courtroom fell silent, and for many, that silence hurt more than any testimony could have. Why would a man studying criminology, someone who should have understood forensic science better than most, leave behind the very evidence that would seal his fate? Was it arrogance? A desire for fame? A compulsion he couldn't control? Or was the truth even darker? Something hidden entirely from the public? Even after the guilty plea, a sense of incompleteness lingers. Investigators have theories, but no confirmed motive, no manifesto, no confession explaining the why. The murders feel calculated yet senseless, methodical yet chaotic, intimate yet detached. It is a contradiction that haunts both experts and families alike. The house on King Road has since been demolished, but the shadows of that night remain. The questions remain. The unease remains. And the chilling image of a killer walking quietly through a hallway, breathing steadily like he belonged there, lingers in the minds of millions. Because the truth is this: even with conviction, even with the evidence laid bare, we still do not know what drove him. We still do not know what he saw in that house, or what he believed he was taking from those students. We still don't know if they were chosen, or simply convenient. And the most chilling question of all remains unanswered. Was this the first time he tried, or just the first time he didn't walk away unseen?